thank you all for being here today to kind of chat with me through this Requiem Novum. I thought a very good place to start this introduction would actually be to listen to the opening movement. So this is the recording that was put out in 2023 by Voces 8, which is one of the world's premier a cappella vocal ensembles. They paired with Apollo 5 as well to make it so there was a little bit of a fuller sound. And then they also features a soloist who is now British, but she was born in Buffalo, New York, which Tina and I found that out last week. So this is the opening number, which is the traditional Requiem text. So we're just going to sit and listen for the first couple minutes of this, and then I'll do some more chatting after that. And I learned all kinds of things on PowerPoint. You can embed sound files and just hit play if it works right. So that's an introduction. You can kind of hear that it is a very methodical piece, and Mårten Jansson, who's the composer, really did some exceptional work in the overall composition of this. So this is by Mårten Jansson, who's a Swedish composer, and then the new text, the English text that's going to follow the Mass movements, is by actually one of my good friends, Charles Anthony Silvestri. He goes by Tony. And if, for those of you who are well-versed in the choral field, his best friend is Eric Whitaker. And Eric and Tony actually went to college together, and Tony has done many of his settings of text. And it was a very small world when I had my first teaching job in Lawrence, Kansas. Tony lived in Lawrence, Kansas, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and how our friendship came to be as forward here. So, is it gonna go next? There we go. Okay, so Mårten Jansson, he's Swedish, like I said, and the quote he said I really like was, "My music is my own, and I have never tried to be original," which I find that to be a very interesting approach to being a composer. So, Mårten says, "People describe my music as both so sad that it sounds like birds who have lost their wings, and also the happiest classical music we've ever heard." And then he goes on to say, my compositions consist of almost only sacral music. This is to express my own faith, but also my appreciation and respect for the timeless texts that have been used for centuries after centuries. Now, if you all joined us on the September 15th service, we did Mårten Jansson's Missa Brevis, and we sang different movements of his Mass. I actually had the opportunity to meet Mårten in 2019 at the American Choral Directors Association National Convention in Kansas City. He was the composer in residence for Bärenreiter, which is arguably one of the top two music publishers in the entire world. They're based in Germany. So they flew Mårten over. Mårten was doing a lot of press and publicity for, he had just become a composer in residence for them. In 2020, he was getting ready to start his residency with Voces 8 and things. So he was really becoming well known in the United States as well as in the Swedish area. So I met Mårten. I picked up the Missa Brevis because I really liked the cover. That was literally that was my response to it. So I picked up the cover and took it home and started playing through it and went, oh my gosh. So for those of you who are musically inclined, it's in E flat minor. So most masses are not set minor, they're set major and have a movement in the minor. Overall, his entire mass is set in the minor. And then to make it more challenging, it's a cappella. So there's no instrumental support at all. And he wrote a lot of the vocal lines like they were written for instruments. So, when you're playing a clarinet, going from a D and jumping an octave and a half to a B flat, that's very normal. We do that all the time. Sopranos don't do that all the time. So when we were learning to do and move through these, there was a lot of getting that kind of aural sound in our ears. I had to do that coming to Trinity when I first was introduced to the composer Leo Sowerby. Knowing that we, of course, have a strong tradition of singing Sowerby's music, I had heard of him. And I maybe knew a piece, but I couldn't hum it. And after working with the choir, I think we did 2 or 3 Sowerby pieces in my first year. My ear finally kind of became used to it. I understand kind of where he was going in his aural and tonal things. And that's what we have been discovering this fall with Mårten Jansson's music. Mårten is hopefully going to be able to watch our live stream of the performance. He has flown or viewed live stream every single time this piece has been done. And I think we're within the first 10 performances of it in the United States. Yeah. And I know the last time it was done that Mårten was here was done down in Dallas in the Texas area. So I believe we're the first Northeast kind of area to be doing this piece. If you'd like to learn more information about Mårten, Mårten's website is, if you just search Mårten Jansson, his website will come up, and his website has a ton of information. He primarily composed for a female ensemble for 10 years called Carmen, named after, of course, the heroine from Berlioz's opera Carmen. But it was an all treble ensemble that he worked with. So he has quite a bit of treble choral music that he has composed that I'm going to start to explore, because I'm finding the more I dig into Mårten's pieces, the more I really am loving them. And so moving on to Tony, and I'm going to shrink my video for just a second so we can see this. Tony is listed by many people as the preeminent choral lyricist of our time. He has worked with Houston Grand Opera, the King Singers, the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, Westminster Choir College, Westminster Abbey. Those are the ensembles he's worked with. Collaborating composers, Eric Whitaker, Ola Yalo, Kim Arneson, Christopher Tin, Dan Forrest. And if you're a choral person, you will these are the biggest names in choral music right now on the male side. And then he's really known for his poetry. He's an author. He has written many books. He is a speaker. And he actually does some compositions as well. And Tony makes his home in Lawrence, Kansas, where he is on faculty at Washburn University, which is in Topeka. And he teaches ancient and medieval history there. So it's a small world with Tony. I was at a festival. I was a counselor, and this kid walked in named Emma Silvestri. And I went, wonder if she's related to Tony. And then saw that she was from Lawrence, Kansas, and went, okay, she has to be related to Tony. So I walked up to her and I said, are you related to Tony? And she goes, yeah, it's my dad. And I was like, cool, I'm Randy Frye. We're going to be best friends. And I want to learn everything about you. So I got to work with his daughter. That was just a fluke. It ended up being a beautiful thing. And then I moved to Lawrence, Kansas, where I taught for 9 years before coming back to Pennsylvania. And Tony lives in Lawrence. So he came and worked with our choirs. His daughter and I ended up working together a couple more times while she was still in high school. And Tony is at one point even was dating one of my former students, which I was like, whoa, my world connects to Tony Silvestri in so many really cool ways. And then I reached out to Tony and said, hey, we're doing this Requiem Novum. Would you have any interest and ability to meet with me and with my soprano soloist, Tina? And he said yes. So we met with him on Saturday for like 35 minutes and talked through some things and really kind of dug into the text and where he is coming from with his text. So, and Tina, feel free to hop in and say anything since you were at that meeting too. But the movements are set up so it's the traditional Requiem Mass, and then the next movement is a solo by the soprano. And the Requiem Mass is, of course, the parishioners. That's the people who are living, grieving for the dead. The solo soprano movements is the voice of Tony's deceased wife, Julie, singing from beyond the veil to us, the grievance. And there is some really powerful poetry. It was a very emotional conversation. I got emotional, Tina got emotional, Tony got emotional, and Julie died in 2005 from a pretty intense form of cancer and left Tony with 2 young kids and Tony. And he was, and he said this is one of the ways that he was able, and still through the grieving process, was able to do this. And his view of death and life is very different perspective than I had ever thought of. And it talks about his main thing he kept saying was we can't put God in a box. And we might have this idea of what the afterlife is to us, but none of us know that for sure. And Tony started talking about theologies and doctrines, and every denomination does it kind of different. And he said, but that just puts God into this box of what we can understand. But we can't put God in a box because boxes don't exist to God. God is God. And it was a fascinating way to talk about that and to look at that. And he said he views the throne of God and heaven kind of the same as the Tron grid from the 80s movie. And he said for him, the light going in and out is prayers and God's answer. And it's back and forth. And it goes in myriad directions and all of this. And there's one moment in this piece, it's called I Stand Upon the Landscape of Infinity, which is a soprano solo. And it's that one of the few times the choir sings with the soprano. And the choir is emulating the angels who are just worshiping at the throne. Holy, 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 holy. But they don't say anything else. Tina has all of the English text. And it is to really emulate that, the angels sitting at the feet of God, constantly worshiping, constantly praising. And you will hear that in his text painting. You will hear how Mårten has arranged the music. And there are some exquisite moments that come out throughout the text of this. And then we get to feature... Oh, that's the next one. Oh, I got too excited. Sorry. So this is the Requiem text. I took this straight from our Trinity Times. So a special thank you to Peter and all of the work with Trinity Times, because there's been a lot of publicity about this event, and Peter has really helped. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you will see that traditional Latin of the Requiem text. If you come to the concert this afternoon, Madrigal Choir singing, you're going to hear these words, right? It's the Requiem Mass. It is what we do. And then on the right-hand side is a very good English translation of that. I'm not going to read it to you because you're all adults. And there are translations that will be available in the program for each movement, as well as the poetry for Tina's movement. So you can follow along. And I find that the poetry really resonates with me. And I'm thinking about it long after I'm done thinking about the music part of it. I'm still thinking about the poetry. And we get to feature our very own Christina Taylor. So I learned a lot about Tina. I'm still getting to know everyone, and I didn't realize that you were a graduate of Fredonia School of Music. And you have quite a great collection of people you have sung with: the Greg Smith Singers of New York City, the Woodley Ensemble of Washington, D.C., the Cayuga Vocal Ensemble, the Southern Tier Singers Collective. She's involved in local theater with SRO Productions, Tiowaga, oh yes, Community Players, the Tri-Cities Operas, and EPAC. She is a featured soloist, of course, with us many times throughout the year. The Greg Smith Singers, the Madrigal Choir of Binghamton, and the Ithaca Community Chorus. And in case you didn't know, Tina has recording credits with CBS Masterworks of doing Stravinsky's Mass, which I did not know. So I'm looking that up. I'm excited about it. I love Stravinsky. So, but it is when I first found this piece. So here's how this happened. I had found the Missa Brevis. I knew who Mårten was. I'd met Mårten. So in April, I had the opportunity on behalf of the church and some of my students in my school to go to the Eastern Division Conference of ACDA, the Choral Directors Association. And I saw this just laying on the table. And I went, oh, Mårten always has the best cover art. It's so pretty. So I picked it up. Then I opened it and went, oh my gosh, the text is by Tony. And like all of my, and then I had just bought his, literally 5 minutes before picking this up, he had just released a collection of his poetry that some of the publishing companies were selling at this. So I had just picked it up and read one of the poems in the back of the book. And then I looked at this and went, oh my gosh, that's the same poem. I think I'm supposed to buy this. So I bought this and I took it home and I listened to it and went, oh, I must do this someday before I die. I have to do this work. So when we were talking about what was coming next, I was like, well, maybe we could do this at the church. So I called Tina or texted Tina and said, check this out. Let me know what you think. And she said, I need to look at the score before I commit, because listening to it, it sounds not as hard as it is. And then I sent her the score and it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, but got to start working on it now. I think I sent it in July. So Tina has been getting very familiar with this score for about 5 months now. I've been looking at about 6 or 7, and it was just one of those moments where I was like, we have to do this. And then I brought it to the choir, and the choir was like, sure, we'll try it. Hadn't had them convinced yet. But that's the beautiful thing about this choir is they do trust me. So if I tell them we're going to do something, they don't always agree with me, but they are so gracious. And they go, okay, well, they picked you to be in charge. We're going to try this out and see what happens. And if anything, there are some times at the end I went, oh, that was a wonderful experiment. Didn't work. We're going to put that away. Or other times they'll go, oh, I did not think that was what that was going to sound like. We're going to keep that. And so that was kind of this piece. It has been a growing piece and experience for us because it is very technically challenging. The basses are not singing your traditional, like, here's the notes and now I'm going to end here. That's the bass part. They're all over the place in this, and every single voice part has its own challenges. The tenor part actually has probably some of the most lyrical lines, but it sits in a very challenging spot of their voice. It's what's called the passaggio, which is where the break is for tenors, and it kind of just sits there. So if they're a tenor like I am, they get very tired after being up there for a while. Luckily, we have lots of different kind of tenor voices that can handle that and make it through. But it definitely has its challenges for every single voice part. And the ranges, it covers 4 octaves. The basses have low C's and some movements, and Tina has a couple high C's written into the solo part. And that, I mean, it really is big. And then, of course, that doesn't even take into consideration the orchestra. So we have, I had to pare it down just so we could be good stewards of the financial system, but we have 2 violin ones, 2 violin twos, 2 violas, a cello and a bass, English horn and oboe, piccolo and flute, clarinet, bassoon, 2 French horns, and then there's 2 people playing percussion, but there's a billion things back there. And then, of course, front and center, we have a harpist. So this is a larger instrumentation that I had originally thought it was. But we had rehearsal yesterday, and I think I left Trinity floating to my hotel. I was just like, oh, is there anything better than getting to conduct an orchestra? Especially as someone who spends 90% of their time bobbling along at the piano with junior high choir. So getting able to do some of that was just exceptional for me and very fun. And some of those things from my master's and undergrad just started to come back. I was like, oh, I do remember how to do this. Okay. So we have, these are the movements of the Requiem. So we have, of course, our introitus, and then the next text is from, again, the view of the deceased. So, or so the living pray. Then we sing the Kyrie. The response to that is, cry not in anguished voices. Then, of course, we get the Dies Irae. If you would like to see text translations in this score, this little bit here is the first four movements. The rest of this page and all of this page is the Dies Irae by itself. In the bulletin, the Dies Irae takes up 2 full pages. There is so much text, and Mårten was doing the choir a favor and tried to get it over as fast as possible. But I think what Mårten didn't think about was now they have to say the language faster, so they're going Dies Irae. So we've slowed things down to make it so the text is relatable, and then in the middle of it, he slams on the brakes, and we go from 125 beats per minute to 50. So we've been going dita 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 punta, and then all of a sudden it goes to da da dee da, and it's just again this wonderful dichotomy that shows the day of wrath, and then shows though the beauty of the Dies Irae text. And then Tina's response to that is on that day of weeping. Then we go into the Sanctus, which we sing the Sanctus text every Sunday here, so you'll recognize the text. And then after that, Tina reflects, I stand upon a landscape of infinity. That's the throne, being with the throne of God, and that's with the angels at the throne. Holy, holy, holy. That's where you can think about Tron happening. And then we do our traditional Pie Jesu, which we sang this morning as the anthem in the service, and I thought the choir sang that exceptionally well. I was actually so distracted by it. It took me a second to remember what was happening next. That's why I sat down on the organ and looked at the hymn and went, oh, I'm supposed to play the presentation hymn right now. And then I couldn't remember how it went for a second. So if you were like, wow, it's taking a long time, I was very distracted by what had just happened beforehand. I was just sitting in that bliss. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, please do check out the recording of today's service online. It was quite lovely. Then we go into the shortest movement of the entire work. It's about 10 measures long, and it's all about the eternal rest. And we then get the final movement of the choir, which is In Paradisum, which is the same musical things that you will hear in the Introit. So we it's almost a cyclic cycle. We've come full back to the musical ideas. We have new text, but the music is still the same. And then it ends with that final hopeful message from the dead saying, hey, we're here on the other side of eternity. We're waiting. We'll be here when you're ready to come. And when you're here, we'll be together forever. And it's a very, very exceptionally profound work. Our choir personnel, so we have 20 people singing with us, plus Tina being the soloist. We have 21. So you will recognize some of these names. Of course, Idris and Melissa and Barbara and Sharon. And then Katrina is singing with us for this concert. She is well known in the area, sings in quite a different ensembles, but she'll be joining us for this. Our tenors, of course, we have Brad and Steve and Greg, and then we're adding Seamus and Ben. Our alto section is Martha, Sue, Teresa, and Raylene, and then we're adding Rachel Helgeson, which that was a small world moment. Rachel was a graduate student my first or second year in my undergrad at IUP. We had not seen each other. I didn't even recognize her name, and she walked in, and I went, you're Prince Orlovsky. And she went, what? How do you? And then she went, oh my gosh, you're Randy Frye. I was like, yes. So it was a nice moment for a second there because I hadn't seen Rachel in years. And then our bass section is John, Andrew Clark, Bob Peterson, Rick Schumacher, Maker, and Andrew Walkling is joining us for this as well. So we have a nice ensemble of 20 voices, and then they will be an orchestra of 17 behind them. So you hopefully can hear them. And then our strings, here are our string players. We have 2 percussionists, our wind players in the middle, and then our harpist, our brass, and then a special shout out to Idris. Idris is actually the person who took the time and energy to contact and make all of this happen. So yesterday I just walked in and got to conduct. Idris is the one who told time, place, and figured, and it was just wonderful. So thank you very much, Idris, for all you do for us and for me personally. It made my life much easier, and I have a little bit of hair left. So. And then this is the radio music ad that you'll hear on WSKG, but this is, to me, the second most important part of the text. So I'm going to play a little bit while you just read and kind of solidify. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to take this away and then make it so you just see my face when you're on Zoom. Wait, I want to stop sharing. Just hit the red button, Randy. Okay. Get out of here. Forgot. Away. Sorry, I'm not computer savvy, apparently. There we go. So now is the time for you to ask questions or inquiries, things like that. Yes.
I thought you said earlier that you wrote only a cappella.
No, that just happened to be that first mass we sang was completely a cappella. Yeah. Yeah. And if anyone online has any questions, feel free to unmute and shout them out. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. If you have the opportunity to, in the front and back of the sanctuary are some postcards that are just some information about this upcoming gig. If you feel like there's someone in your life who needs to know about this, please grab a couple and share those out. If you're going to a doctor's appointment this week, take it. If you're retired and you just stay home all day, maybe walk over to your neighbors, get some sunshine for a second, come back inside and play with the cats, whatever you do. But thank you all for your support of me and your support of this. And I can't wait to get to do this. It's been a long time coming, and we've worked really, really hard. And I think it's going to be something that's pretty special. I know it will be for me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.